It must be like a nervous tick or something because I'm always singing when it's first come on. Good morning. Welcome to Walk and Talk with Lamont Carey. Again, this is one of them days where we just gonna be doing the talking about because it's raining out there, and and I ain't interested in doing nothing in the rain. I'm trying to go to the car and back. So how y'all doing this morning? So, did you? I like the village concept, and I was hoping that we could continue on doing the village. Now, I was told yesterday somebody had came in on the live and didn't want to be acknowledged. And they said sometimes people just want to come on and not have their name mentioned. And so until you communicate with me through text, then I won't mention your name. So, because I don't want to prevent you from coming on. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I want to continue the village concept. So have any of y'all started doing the kindness, speaking to people that you would normally speak to, and if so, how has that been going so far? Because it will be 24 hours now, right? Because we started yesterday at 8 o'clock or a little bit after 8. So if you have been doing the speaking to people that you don't know, I'm interested in figuring out or finding out how that's going. Ski Wee, good morning. So I want to continue to talk about the village, but I want to switch it. So yesterday before I do that, have any of you started working on the budget? Did you download the budget template from like Google, or do you have your own budget that you write out everything on so you'll know where all of your money is going? If you've done that, let me know because I want to know what that process felt like. So, also in the village, right? If all of us coming together working to improve our communities, we each bring our own life experiences. And sometimes in those life experiences that we have, there are triggers for us. And so triggers usually, well, what I learned about triggers is that triggers are things that either make you think about something in the past that may cause you to tense up. It may cause you to be frustrated. It may make you cry. And for some people, a trigger may cause them to use go back to their former addictions. Skiwee said, I very seldom see my neighbors, but I do speak to people that I don't know all the time, especially since I work retail part-time. Oh yeah, you got to have your speaking game on 1,000 when you working in retail. So did you do the budget thing? Did you work on the budget, Skiwee? So when we talking about the village concept, we all have our own triggers. And ladies and gentlemen, so you'll know, I was told that some of y'all come on and don't want to be acknowledged, so I won't acknowledge you unless you respond to me with a text or something. So David, good morning, David. Good morning. How are you? We still on the village concept. We on part 4. So I was talking about when we come together to work in our village. Hey, Felicia, superstar poet. When we come together to work on the village, we bring our own life experiences, and sometimes those life experiences include trauma that we walk around with. And I think we have to be aware of our triggers. And as I was saying about triggers, so this is crazy. So I have never used drugs in my life, right? Never smoked a cigarette, never even had a beer. But in prison, to try to get these, to make parole, I attended every program that I could possibly attend. And one of the programs that I attended was like NA and AA. And so NA and AA taught me about triggers. Felicia said, hey, hey. So it taught me about triggers. And so again, what triggers are things that have make us think back of some of the traumatic experiences that we have, like or addictions. So sometimes when people who are using drugs and have stopped using drugs, but if they go in a certain atmosphere, smell a certain thing, see a certain person, it reminds them of their time of doing drugs, and they say that those urges come back. Skiwi said, nope, but I need to try. She's talking about the template. So again, you can Google, right, budget template, and some should come up, and just pick the one that you think covers your basic stuff. So maybe you have to add some things in there, but it usually have like your rent, your light bills, your car note, your meals for the day, your entertainment. It usually give a real thorough breakdown. I actually use those in my programs when I'm working on my Bossing Up program or one of my youth programs. So I think if you Google, if you Google budget template, that it will come down. So back to triggers, right? And so some of us have experienced some real traumatic experiences. And I think I may have called some for Dot based on, she said she used to be scared to come outside when we was around in that neighborhood, engaged in the stuff that we was engaged in. Felicia said, urges are natural, but how you handle them is what matters. Exactly. And so that's what I want to talk about. So you seem to be familiar with urges. So can you give us some tips on like certain urges that we have and ways that you know that you can address those to deal with those urges, and so we won't slip and fall? And so one of the things why I thought that the triggers was important when we're talking about doing the village is because we're going to be engaging people, some that we have normally wouldn't have engaged, others that gonna trigger us, right? So for me, so let me finish about the triggers. So triggers can be, like I remember a guy saying when he was in Lawton, he hadn't used drugs the whole time that he was in Lawton. But when he was on the bus coming back to D.C. to get released, the closer that he got to D.C., the more and more that he had this desire for crack. So his triggers was actually D.C. Che said, good morning, friends. Good morning, welcome. So we still talking about the village, but now we're talking about trauma and our triggers. And so I know some of you have had, as well as myself, then had traumatic experiences, and we just want to be mindful of them before we start engaging the community that is part of our village, so we be aware of what those triggers are, and then we can understand them when they starting to happen. Some triggers may be, you know, you might meet somebody, not even meet somebody, but you can see somebody that you instantly do not like. And some people say I could just read bad behavior, but a lot of times it could be associated with people. We read similarities in them that we have found in people from our past or even our current. And so I just want you to be mindful of your own trauma, and so you just don't walk into something and be traumatized again. So Felicia said positive outlets such as engaging in the arts and just acknowledging your weaknesses and asking for help. Shay said, yeah, gut instincts. So, yes, that's what we usually say, gut instincts. And sometimes we follow those well, with me, sometimes I follow those gut instincts, but it seems like when I haven't followed them is when they seem to be the most true. And I end up messed up. So, Felicia, so say I have, so say I don't even recognize my trauma, and I'm starting to engage people in the village, and then I go into an alleyway to talk to some individuals, and then in that alleyway, it brings back, or it brings up some memories or some experiences that I've had in the past, and so, but I'm not aware of the trauma or the experiences that I've had, and so I'm not aware of the triggers. So you saying using art as a form of addressing the triggers, and if so, how? Kiana said, as a mother, a trigger is when I feel like I can't provide for my Jode. What do you mean, job? You know, because you know we be typing fast. You like, it might be like me, or so. Can you explain that? So that you can't provide, and so that triggers my kid. Oh, Kiana said, okay, my kids. Chase said it's the PTSD syndrome. Explain the if you don't mind, Chase, explaining the PTSD syndrome. So for those of us that may not be aware of it. And Kiana, do you mind sharing, like, if you can't provide for the kids, so has that become like a trigger? And then when you feel that trigger coming on, how do you like get a handle on it, and so you won't do nothing crazy? Now, so when I first came home from prison, right, after being in those NA and AA classes where I learned about triggers, what I thought some of my triggers was like clothes, like buying clothes, right? And the reason that I thought that clothes was like one of my triggers is because, you know, when you're in the fast life, you usually dress yourself the way that you want to dress, and sometimes I used to spend money on clothes, but I knew if I'm a changed person, if I want to live my life different than I lived my life before, that I couldn't buy expensive clothes. One, I couldn't afford it, and so I thought if I came home and I bought some expensive clothing, and that it would trigger me and wanted to re-engage in the street life so that I can afford that lifestyle. And that wasn't the reason that I was in that lifestyle, but I just figured that was one of my triggers. So for the first couple of years that I was home, well, up until Melanie told me to expand my clothes, right? That I used to just wear like just black zip-up jacket, black do-rag, and just regular inexpensive like clothes and shoes. And because nobody understood that was that I was afraid that it would trigger me in becoming a drug dealer or doing some of the other stuff I used to do in the past. And so I thought that was my trigger. But once I realized, in order to expand the opportunities that I'm trying to create myself, that I had to have more versatility in my clothing purchase. And I know that might sound minute based on some of the trauma and triggers that you all have, but it's a trigger for me, and so I needed to be aware of that, and so that I could avoid from getting caught up in some things that I didn't want to get caught up in. So if you just joining us, we're still on The Village, and we're talking about trauma and engaging the people in our village and what triggers that may arise within us that may frustrate us, make us disengage, make us angry. And so we wanted to be able to identify those triggers. But before I guess we can really identify those triggers, we have to kind of figure out like what is the trauma that some of the trauma that we may not be aware of or the trauma that we have. Because if you've been victimized by drug dealers or people that look a certain way, you may not be willing. I mean, it may be your trigger. It may traumatize you in dealing with those people. Chase said post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of us who have PTSD experience anxiety when these triggers are presented. Okay, keep going. Give us some more. Can you, I love examples, right? Because if you can give me an example, then that means I can see it clear. So, some of the ways that I help people to discover and deal with their trauma, it's like Miss Scott said, I use the art. And I use art in a way. So art is one of the most non-threatening ways that I've found not to get in people feel exposed, right? So not to be judged. And so I'll guide them through one of my artistic workshops, and I make sure that I create a safe space, not just a safe space physically, but a safe space emotionally. And so when I do workshops, I set rules on, well, we set rules as a collective on how we're going to engage and respect each other's space, privacy, vulnerability, and all that, right? And so I do it as a collective versus me just stating what the rules are, and that gives people a sense of ownership and a sense of comfort. And so now that you can create the physical space, right? I mean, safe space, and then I'll set rules on when we take upon this writing process, what we will and what we will not do. So one of the things, if I'm doing a writing exercise where I'm trying to help them to figure out what their trauma is, I don't ask to see it, right? And I allow them to do it in fiction or nonfiction. And most people choose fiction, especially kids. But the one thing that I learned about with kids have such limited life experiences that even in their fiction writing, they begin to tell a whole lot of truth. And I allow them, based on their level of comfort, whether they share their work with us or not. And so that's one of the ways I help individuals figure out some of the trauma that they dealing with and how to bring it forth. But again, I advise, do not go digging for people's trauma if you have no clue whatsoever on how to close them up or stabilize them in a way that it won't be re-traumatizing to them, and they'll leave their time with you worse off than when they came. So don't go digging for people's trauma if you don't know what the hell you doing. So back to the village concept. So again, because we come in with our own life experiences and our own trauma, we have to be aware of our own trauma so we don't re-trigger that trauma, and also so we won't push or try to force our traumatic experiences on to the people in the village that we're dealing with. Felicia said most are not familiar with their triggers, and some feel that certain behaviors is normal. They're normal. It is not until knowledge of self when people can recognize their triggers. Growing up in poverty triggers many. Basically, you got to get the root of those triggers. The underlying root cause is fear of most triggers, is fear of experiencing another negative outcome. Hey, I totally, definitely uh, believe that. So Felicia, when they experience these triggers, I mean, when they think of their trauma, so you're saying that it keeps them from moving forward or engaging in certain things because of the fear that they will be traumatized again. Is that what you're saying? Makes to make sure I'm clear. Paradise, paradise, lullabies. Paradise said, "Don't go digging for people's trauma. Not at all. Not at all, unless the goal of the program and the reason that they are engaging you is to overcome uh, those traumas or limitations or what have you, right?" So, Miss Felicia said writing is one. So, do you have a specific approach? Do you use writing to help people find a safe space within themselves so that they can move forward? Star, hey Star, we still on uh, the village. Felicia said, "Yup, you are correct." But today, Star in Paradise, we're talking about engaging our village and being aware of our own traumatic experiences and triggers. Because when you engage in the community, I mean, 9 out of 10 times you're going to run into some people from your past, right? Because a lot of times people don't really move out of their communities. They might move around in the community, but not out of their community. And so we have to prepare ourselves on being able to deal with not just the external forces within our community, but also the internal barriers, trauma, and judgment that we bring to the table. Lady Flavor, send a heart. Love you too, Sister Star. Say good morning. So now we preparing as a unit to engage our village. And so now we have to figure out, how do we keep ourselves safe, happy, determined, and moving forward? And do you shut down when you encounter something that you don't like, or you more accustomed to talking about it? Because if you shut down, me or nobody else can be of service, because we can't read your mind. And we always should want each other to be functioning at the highest level possible. And so when you shut down, that doesn't allow you to work through. I mean, I know some of us have our own processes, and withdrawing from people is one of our processes, but for some that may not be. And I just learned that I was ineffective as my communication, because when you piss me off, I'm done. I'm quiet. I ain't dealing with you no more. But I never addressed the issue. And in my mind, the issue may have been greater than it actually was, or the thing that I took offense to, the other person didn't intend it to be offensive, and I just mistook it based off of my past or personal experiences. So I think it's always when you feel offended or disrespected, or somebody do or say something that you don't like, that we should address it, but address it in the most respectful way, and let's have a conversation about it so we can move forward. Because we have to be, what they say, the examples of what we want to see in our community, right? So Shay said an example of PTSD would be a domestic violence victim may experience anxiety when they hear and see couples arguing. This could be a situation in public, on TV, or in the movies. You are correct. You have to be aware of your own trauma in order to push through. And when these triggers are presented, a person can stop, remain calm, and mentally deal with the situation. So I love that. So when you say you have to be able to be aware of your own trauma in order to push through, and know when them triggers are presented, when you can stop, remain calm, and mentally deal with it. So how do you identify those triggers? And so how do you know, like, okay, I need to stop, push through, and stay calm? What does that actually look like? Because some of us need these skills so that we can move forward, and not in just working with the village, but just working through the things in our life that keeps us stagnating and from advancing in the way that we want to advance. Star laughed. Yeah, let's talk about it. I got issues. All right, what's those issues, Star? Felicia said, yes, I do. I give folks pen and paper and say just write, draw, and silly as this sounds, tell folks to shake. You got shake negative energy off, like the brush the dirt off your shoulder thing. I hear that. So again, Felicia said when she said she used writing, use your pen, use paper. She say just write, draw, write silly, stuff. So she's saying brush that negative energy off. So you're saying basically get yourself in a good move and just write whatever come to mind, regardless of what it is. And I guess gradually you'll get to where you want them to end up. Star said it's very hard to be vulnerable. A shutdown is usually due to a discomfort. I'm an expert. I'll shut all the way down. So when you shut down, Star, and so say you shut down around me, and I come and I be like, Shawty, what's going on, Shawty? What's wrong? I'm seeing you ain't engaging, you looking like you want to be left alone. Talk to me. How can I help? So do you not respond? You just say I'm good? Because I'm famous for, ain't nothing wrong with me, I'm good. I used to be famous for that. I even got a chapter of that in the book Dead Before 18 on how to help people to work through that. So do you just totally disengage? Ain't no room for talking, so ain't no need to even come to you trying to get you to talk, Star? Is that how that work? So Shay say knowledge your triggers, accept your trauma, then you will be able to move on in a healthy way. So Shay, Felicia has said earlier that some people don't even know their triggers. So how do you become aware of your triggers that leads to your trauma? So how do you know when this situation is or this what I'm feeling right now is a trigger and it's going to produce some kind of traumatic response? So how do you know? Hey, Pat. Pat said, good morning, Lamont. Glad you're inside today. Yes, Pat. I have been inside for 2 days. Yesterday it was cold, and today it's raining. So I remember what you said about gangsters. So what is the rules? I'm sorry for going off subject. So what is the rules about the Pat? Like what can the weather not be like, and for you not to be able to take your pets and stuff outside? Because I wasn't trying to traumatize the dog or myself, but so I'm just clueless in some things. So we're talking about the village again, and we're talking about recognizing our own trauma and triggers before we engage the village. So how do you recognize or discover what triggers you and what traumatizes you? Because the triggers are usually the warning signs, right? The warning signs of, hey, you're getting in a dangerous space. This is going to trigger you to be angry. This is going to bring up that memory of that fight that you had on that corner. This person's personality reminds you of the abusive father or stepfather that was in your life. How do we recognize those triggers? So Felicia said, yes, you can change a negative thought into a positive thought. So do any of the people that ever been in your class experience depression? Because I know we've had some people that has been a part of the show that said that they suffer from depression. And there are a few people in my life that have experienced or go through depression. And me not really having experienced like depression, that it just seemed like, my usual response used to be like, you just got to get up and do something. Don't sit and wallow in it. Get out, go do something, right? And not recognizing or understanding how severe and crippling that depression can really be. So my question is to you, Felicia, have you ever had people in your program that suffer from depression, and these writing exercises have helped them uh, deal with the depression, or be able to manage it, or even help them come out of it? But I'm still interested in Star, when Star talking about she shuts down. So we're talking about the village trying to come together, because I believe that we all have the resources in our village, in our communities, in our country to meet the needs and wants of the people in the village. And so how do we engage that village? And if this is the 4th episode, you go back to see 1, 2, and 3, you'll see some of the things that we talked about, like budgeting, making sure that we're sustainable. And today we're talking about recognizing our trauma and our triggers before we engage other people, because we don't want to re-trigger our trauma. We want to get it into a place where it's manageable to us, so that we can be active and engaging and give the best parts of ourselves to our village. Star said, I'm going to say I'll be all right if I don't trust you. If I'm comfortable with you, I'll give you a little. Those who know have my best interests, and I have done type of wisdom to help me, I'll share. But I'm used to sharing with myself through writing, which I have kind of paused because I don't want to hear what I have to say. Wow. So you start ducking you. That's deep. You never know what will be said from your inner self, but I need to get back because that's my release. And since this took so long to write, I've suffered from depression. Well, I am so sorry that you suffer from depression. So I'm in agreement with you and Felicia about writing, because writing is one of the main things that I use to help people like address a lot of stuff that's going on with them. And I indirectly, like writing indirectly helped me, right? When I started writing books, it was on a challenge, the first book. But every book that I wrote, I started recognizing that it was helping me address some things that was going on with me internally. It was helping me make better decisions. It was helping me to think more critically. It was even helping me recognize situations before they even happen. Because like in my prison book, The Heal, that I wrote in prison, that book was based on recognizing danger before the danger even happens. It was also recognizing that in prison you get in stuff over petty stuff that you wouldn't even recognize on the streets. And so writing has been very instrumental in helping me become the man that I am today. So I know writing helps, but I'm sorry that you suffer from depression. And sometimes in my writing, I see things that I didn't want to see, but I needed to see them, because writing puts it in the third person. And when you write it out, for me, sometimes it helps me address the issue and solve the problem and find balance in being able to deal with it. Lady Flavor said, as you know, I back away from healthy people. I give chances, and I have no problem addressing what makes me uncomfortable or what I don't understand. I'm learning that I may never understand some things, and I have to accept that. The trigger is disrespect, belittling, and not being heard and respected, and being different. So the village concept that we're talking about, Lady Flavor, you're gonna experience all of that, right? Because when you engage in people that really don't want to be engaged, some of them gonna be disrespectful because they have never even been engaged, right? And they don't know how to respond, and they're thinking that you're trying to trick them, right? And so sometimes people respond to things that they're not used to, either by shutting down or trying to push you away. And one of the main ways that people try to push you away is to ridicule you, to be disrespectful, hoping that'll frustrate you and that you will walk away. And so we're trying to figure out, like, how do we stabilize ourselves to understand and know that some of this stuff is going to come towards us, so we be prepared, and so we won't be like traumatized by it, and doesn't affect our ultimate goal of empowering each other and empowering ourselves. So we have to figure out, like, how do we deal with the things that we know that impact us. Of course, we ain't gonna be perfect. Of course, we gonna continue to make mistakes. But it's great that you understand what things that triggered you, what triggered you. So I respect that, love that, and say, let's figure out how we can push past those things, because if we want to improve our village, all of this stuff exists inside of our village. And not being heard, woo! Sometimes people hear us but pretend they don't hear us, or they don't comprehend what they're hearing, or they don't want to respond to what they're hearing. So they be like, huh? What you mean? I ain't remember that. And respect. So respect is a two-way street, they say. But I think that you still have to give respect even when people aren't being respectful, with the hopes of that they will learn to appreciate your truthfulness, and that you, even though they be disrespectful to you, that you still show them mercy, that you still show them grace. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect in that, because usually when I'm disrespected, I tense up, anger like rips through me. But I have been working on myself where I can try to catch that and not be impulsive in my response, because usually when I'm used to being disrespected, my first response is swinging. But now I'm able to contain myself and realize that it's not about me, that it's about them. And for years, I tried to avoid conflict and disrespect because I always handled it with violence. But let me tell you what taught me better than anything on how to deal with conflict. Car dealers, them people that work on your cars, that you go in there for one thing and they tell you all this other stuff is wrong with your car. Yeah, that is how I learned how to deal with conflict, dealing with people that was working on the car. And so now I'm more comfortable in these other settings, because when I go in these institutions, some of these youngers and these old folks can be disrespectful as hell. But you got to remember that it's not you, that it's them, their experiences, their trauma. And so people are taught different things about other people and people that look like this way, right? And so we respond. Real quick, and then I'm going to read the rest of y'all stuff. So I'm going to Africa in March, right? And so when I went to take these, like get the yellow fever shot and all this stuff, they gave me these pamphlets. And in these pamphlets, it told me, so in short, it made me not trust, they said all this stuff so I wouldn't trust Africans. And this is where I'm going, right? And so sometimes people can put their own fears onto you. And I didn't recognize that until after I booked my hotel at an American hotel. So that interfered with me getting the full Ghana experience, because I said they're professionals, they know what's going on. And so I took their stuff as face value and made me skeptical of dealing with my own people, right? And I'm not saying that I'm supposed to ignore everything that they say, but I shouldn't allow it. The stuff that they saying about drinking the water, I should take, right? The stuff that they saying because they cook in the water, and so don't just be eating off of any stand. Some of that stuff I should take, but they sold me pills to use because they say when you go to I haven't had this before in other countries, but they saying that sometimes it can make eating the food can cause you to use the bathroom. So what the hell do I supposed to eat? So they made me, they just put all of these other things to worry about when dealing with people in Africa. And I'm like, but these are the people that I'm going to be around. These are the people that I'm going to look for a connection with. So other people experiences sometimes influence how we experience. And so we got to recognize that and don't allow their perspective to flow our own. So Felicia said, yes, I do. And yes, they are brilliant writers and artists, but their own worst critic. Yes, indeed. We're talking about depressed people. I mean, people that's going from depression. Definitely some of their best, worst critics. Even me. Like, I don't even go back and look at my own videos because I don't want to see me because I only see the mistakes. Shay said, when I am triggered, it comes out physically. I become anxious, stressed, and may have a terrible feeling in my stomach. This leads to anxiety, depression, etc. We have to listen to our bodies because it tells you things that are wrong. So how do you move forward when you feeling all of this, when you become anxious? How do you deal with becoming anxious? How do you deal with stress? And what do you do with this thing in your stomach? Do you just go sit down, or like how do you learn how to deal with that and so you be able to move forward? Felicia said, trust. It's my parents' fault. Explain. Felicia said, writing. I mean, it is my parents' fault. Oh, writing is your parents' fault. Okay. Now we clear. Okay. Shay said, writing or journaling is an excellent way to address your trauma. Yes, I definitely agree. Shay said, writing your feelings hidden in storyline like you did in The Hill. Yes, I pulled so much stuff. Yeah, I totally agree. And if you ever read The Hill, you see or understand a whole lot of the experiences that I had to deal with, not only in prison, but some of those experiences that you see in the characters I've experienced just in life in general. Skiwi said, I'm not a writer, but I think on impulse, which is not good. And I continue to let things build up instead of speaking on it or being afraid to ask for help because sometimes I care what others think when I shouldn't. So Skiwi, I totally agree. And I used to be one of those people that would be like, I don't care what other people think. You shouldn't care what other people think. But the truth being told, depending on who says it, and sometimes it can be a complete stranger, and how it's said, it impacts us all. But I do know when you allow stuff to build up, that creates impulse, right? When you allow, if you stuff keep happening and you don't let it out, if you don't find ways to vent, like some of the, if you have read my book Dead Before 18, you will see like how some of the ways that I talk about to deal with like stuff that build up, like controlling your anger. And one of the things that I've done is walking, right? You can walk and you can talk, you have a conversation with God about it, or you can have a conversation with a dead friend or loved one and just expressing it to them. Some people that you were comfortable with talking to that no longer exist. You can still have those conversations with them and get the anger part out, right? But I think all situations should eventually be addressed to the person that causes the situation so that you can be clear and they can be clear on how they hurt you. And again, because sometimes it's not their intent. Sometimes we interpret something based off of past experiences in a way that connects to that past experience, and not the way that the person actually intended for it to come out, right? Or sometimes we say stuff in a heated moment and it comes out in the worst way possible because we want to push you away. And so I've done that. And so in the book Dead Before 18, for young dudes, I was talking about how to deal with some of your own trauma, your own anger, so that when you confront people or talk to people, you can deal with it. Because effective communication is got to be the foundation of our life and our experiences, and especially if we're talking about creating a village. We have to be able to communicate and understand that everybody don't communicate the same way, and we cannot act off. We got to get control of our impulses, because example of somebody just responding from impulse. You know how when we was younger and somebody joning on your mother and you don't say nothing, but when the person walk away, your friends say, if he said that to my mother, I'd have punched him in his face. And then the next time somebody jones on your mother, right? Or y'all joan and they say something about your mother, you punch them in the face. The next time you punch them in the face. And then it reaches a point you can think that they get ready to say something about your mother and you punch them in the face. So that is impulse, right? But it's also learned behavior. And a lot of the anger that is displayed in our relationship and in our communities is learned behavior. But until we recognize like the root of all of it, we continually act off impulse. So writing is a good way to address or begin to address what we feeling in the moment. And sometimes you don't just got to sit down and write about what my trauma is, but just write about how you feeling right now today, or how you been feeling this week. Because writing it down and rereading it, it helps you learn your own triggers. And then when you feel your triggers, you can respond in a way that's more conducive to how you want your life and your day going. Felicia said, patience is so important when dealing with people who deal with any form of trauma. I agree, but patience is the hardest thing in the world for some of us to learn. So how do you learn to be patient, Felicia? Skiwi, that's my dream trip. My son went for a month and the pictures he took was beautiful. Yeah, so I'm going to Ghana and it's on my bucket list. And so with my bucket list, the things that's on my bucket list, I start putting them into the universe, right? And I created the opportunity where the opportunity kind of showed itself, and I just did what I had to do in order to have that opportunity. So my goal, I just came up with the idea today, right? I mean, yesterday, is that I'm going to capture my experience, my emotions on my trip to Ghana, and probably produce like a picture book with poems or something called Going Home. So that's what I came up with, because I'm excited about doing this. And so I wanted to figure out how to capture it and be able to share it with you all. But I intend to do the show while there and show you all some of Ghana while I'm there. Felicia said you have to boost your immune system before you travel to Africa. Right, I done did the yellow fever shot. I got the malaria pills. I got the bathroom pills. I took everything that they said that I'm gonna need before I get to Ghana, and I'm reading everything that I can possibly find, and so I'll be fully prepared. But the organization that I'm going to Ghana with, to meet with, so I'm going to be a part of a festival, headline a festival. I'm going to do writing workshops in jails, in communities. I'm going to teach about turning your passion and your talents into incomes. So I'm going to be doing a broad list of things over there. But more than anything, I want to be able to connect to my people. It's always been, I've heard so much negative stuff about Africa, so I didn't want to be engaged in Africa. But I know now that sometimes people say stuff to keep us away from things that we will care about. But now I'm looking for that connection, to feel what it feels like to be in Africa, to be with our people, and hopefully I find a second home. Felicia said rejection can cause for you not to be vulnerable and share anything. So how do we deal with rejection, Felicia? Felicia also says some village anecdotes has taught us how not to effectively deal with triggers, saying things such as suck it up and get over it, or just pray and leave it there. talking about it is not going to fix it. Wow. All of that stuff is what I hear men and women telling young boys. You be a grown, you a big boy. Ain't you a big boy? Big boys don't cry. You my big man. You ain't no sucker. Stop crying. And so as boys, we start smothering that stuff. And then we only show our pain through violence. So definitely I definitely agree with you with that people tell us how we should deal with our pain. And please, I hope that's not how I'm telling you to deal with your pain. I'm just saying, trying to tell you how some of the outlets that I've learned. Hey, Kay. Kay said, patience is not an attribute that I possess, and I truly need to learn how to harness its essence. So one of the ways that I create or I deal with patience, right? It depends. Like if I'm working on a project, right? I have to tell myself, it's going to take me 3 months to do this project. But this is what I got to do to lead up to that project. And so the things that I have to do to lead up to that project, I check them off once they accomplish. And that keeps me being patient when I'm working on projects. But patience with people is a little bit more trying, right? I try to communicate effectively with them so they understand what it is that I want or what I expect from them. And I try to understand what they expect from me. But it's a constant thing because people sometimes can be frustrated. And so patience is one of those things that other people on here may be more equipped to help you with than I am, because it depends on the situation and the individual that I'm dealing with on how my patience works. Shay, so if anybody got some tips on how to build up your patience, please share it so Kay can that could be a part of what Kay can be working on. Shay said, replying to Felicia, you are so right. Okay, Felicia said, patience is also learned behavior. I agree. You have to place yourself in another person's shoes to be patient. So, Kay, you hear that? You got to place yourself in the other person's shoes. Now, how do you actually place yourself in the other person's shoes? How does that work? Kay said, exactly. What you mean exactly, Kay? Shay said, communication is the key. So, but we communicate in all kinds of ways. We communicate verbally and we communicate non-verbally. And sometimes I've had experiences with people and, they saying one thing, but they body language is like, dude, if you don't get the hell out of my face, or dude, I am not trying to hear that garbage that you talking about. So communication is nonverbal and verbal, and how do we match that communication? So Felicia, you said put yourself in that other person's shoes. How do we actually put ourselves in the other person's shoes? How can we be expected to experience or see things from their perspective if we're not completely clear on what their perspective is? How do we do that? How do we, so Kay can work on her patience and so I can continually develop my patience? But now this is a way that I work on my patience. This is all truth, right? I am a complainer, right? And I know people be like, man, don't stop complaining, blah, 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 blah. But Lamont Carey is a complainer, because what complaining does for me, it makes me act. It makes me strategize. It makes me do something. So I am a complainer. So we ever having a conversation and I'm complaining, just know I am just not complaining and not doing nothing. Complaining makes me work, right? Complaining helps me deal with my patience. But more than anything, complaining about an issue keeps me focused on it, keeps me looking for a solution, and helps me to prove that I can overcome something. Lady Flavor said, no, you're a perfectionist. Me? A perfectionist? Maybe sometimes. maybe sometime. So can we give some other tips on patience? And since Felicia, you said that it's learned behavior. So how do we figure out what the root causes are of that learned behavior so that we can recognize it and begin to work on it? So we may have to come back to that tomorrow because I don't want to take up much more of your time. But I hope you all feel like we progressing, right? And that we are getting closer to being working on the stuff that we gonna have to, get a handle on so that we can uh, build ourselves up and be able to engage our community and engage ourselves in a more meaningful way. Because you know how some of us may look in the mirror and can't stand that person that's looking back at us. But I believe working on some of the things that we have been discussing will help empower us and to see the beauty and the unique perfection that we all possess within ourselves. Shay said we have to learn empathy. So let's talk about that. We may have to talk about it tomorrow, but what does that look like? Kay said people are frustrating and they oftentimes create the tensions that leads up to feelings of impatience. Therefore, it's difficult for me to put myself in someone else's shoes that does not have the ability to perceive a situation from another perspective. Kay, what if you ask them to explain it to you, right? So the thing that drives you crazy, or have you ever explained to them why that it drives you crazy so that they can see from your perspective? So maybe you can't put yourself in their shoes, but you can create a situation where they're able to put themselves in your shoes and be able to understand what makes you impatient with them, right? And so that's another part of the effective communication. If we express exactly what we're feeling and try to connect it to why we feeling that way, and that will show me your perspective. Because unless I know, all I know is your end results and your words, right? And if you don't tell me why you are uncomfortable or unhappy with me, then I can never make you or work to make you understand my perspective on the thing that makes you uncomfortable with me. So in order for you to understand my perspective, I have to be able to share with you my perspective, and you have to be able to share with me your perspective. So for me, that is one of the ways that I think that we can put ourselves in the other person's shoes. We have to be able to communicate that we fully need to understand what it is that they're trying to say and why they're saying it. Oh, another thing that I do to better understand people is ask open-ended questions. So I don't be like, man, I know you mad, so I'm going to leave you alone. I'd be more like an open-ended question like, so can you tell me why you frustrated with me? Right? And so that doesn't just give them you can't just have a single response like no, yes. They have to elaborate on why they feel frustrated or angry with me. And again, this is some stuff that I'm continuing to learn, and I haven't always been that stuff in relationships, right? But I have learned from relationships that I have to explain my position fully so the other person understands why I feel the way that I feel, and that gives them the tools to be able to help improve our communication or solve the problem that we currently going through. Felicia said active listening is a start when learning how to be patient, knowing that person is not you and is not your battle, and everyone learns differently. Shay said empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Lady Flavor said, I pray and meditate every morning and evening to gain patience, clarity on what I need throughout my day. Star said, being empathetic, everyone isn't set up the same. Some people will say, look at that kid's dirty clothes. Their mama is trifling. But someone else may say, hey, look at that baby's clothes. Maybe there is a need or a problem. People are so judgmental instead of understanding that other people have different sufferings. Kay said, I've tried that, Lamont. What did you try? So look, I don't want to keep y'all. We've been on an hour. Star said, you do that during the live. Open-ended questions. Noted. That's what Star said. Gotta get on it. So yeah, open-ended questions. So tomorrow, y'all, can we talk about patience, empathy, and how to techniques that y'all have learned to work on your patience? I know Lady Flavor said meditation and prayer. Others said learning the other person's perspective. So I'm gonna let you go now, but I'm gonna see you tomorrow, 8 a.m. unless I have something else to do. But the plan is to be here. So share, comment. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. And I appreciate you all. Let's pass this stuff on to people that we know will benefit from it, because we giving some stuff that's going to empower us, and let's empower other people. So the village, see you all tomorrow. Later.